what was the date of when this has to be on the ballot? When is this ballot or an election or whatever it's called that it's going to appear on? What
Sure.
is the date? What is the time frame?
Yeah, it depends. If I'm successful sooner, it can be on the 2010 ballot. If I'm not, if it takes me a little longer, it'll be on the 2012 ballot. I would love to get enough support fast enough to put it on the 2010 ballot. That will require basically that I raise a lot of money and get a lot of signatures between now and January of next year. I'm not ruling that out as a possibility. I'm recognizing there's a logistical challenge to be met. It just really depends how quickly the community responds to this effort as to whether or not we can do it in 2010. But if it takes till 2012, it takes till 2012. We've already been at this for 5, going on 6 years. If it takes another 2 or 3, it takes another 2 or 3. But we'll get there.
When does the state require for the constitutional amendment to be offered, so that they can schedule it for 2010?
Right. I don't have the exact dates at my fingertips, but I can tell you in my mind I know that the practical deadline to gather the signatures would be January, this coming January, about 6 or 7 months from now. And again, I've got some strategic plans that might achieve that. I won't discuss those openly because it's campaign strategy, and if somebody hears it outside the core campaign, I'd be concerned they'd be prepared to combat it. So I'll keep the strategy to myself, but I will assure you that there is a plan that might reach that level. So we may get that done.
Michael, this campaign to get the signatures required for a constitutional amendment, it's not about the Catholic Church, I assume.
No, it's not.
It's much broader than that. It's
Right.
about the law. It's about children.
Right.
And I believe that to bring into the campaign the Catholic Church's great opposition, the Catholic Church's response might only turn people away.
Right.
And I wonder, do you agree with that?
Sure. As I've indicated to church officials numerous times, in person and in writing, I do not want this issue to ever be about the church. I've never made the legislation directed only at the Catholic Church or only at religious institutions. It applies to anybody who harms a child. If you look at my website, you won't find a single reference to the Catholic Church. Now, I do hold the legislature accountable on my website for having failed to accept the arguments that I've put in front of them and having failed to pass the legislation that's been filed every single year. But there is no specific reference to the Catholic Church on the website because this is an issue. The Catholic Church has got freedom of speech and freedom of political participation like everyone else. They have had the right, obviously under our constitutional provisions, to go make their argument. The problem I have is that they've won. The legislature has accepted those arguments, I think, to the detriment of child safety in the state of Florida. And that's wrong. So when you look at the website, you'll see, and on this, for example, here on this flyer, there is none. But as I've also made clear to the Catholic Church's officials, when people ask, why am I here today, 5, 6 years into this effort, I am going to tell the truth. I am going to explain why it's not done. And lest anyone wonder to the contrary, do I know what I'm doing in the legislature? I worked there for 4 years. I've passed numerous pieces of legislation on behalf of children's issues and other issues, other consumer protection issues. I know how to do it. I know the system well. I know the people in it, and I've had a lot of support. I've had free support. If anyone ever criticizes lobbyists as a group to you, let them know that lobbyists have been some of my best advocates in this process, and I haven't paid them a dime to do it. They've done it because they've taken their time and called in some of their favors to try to change the laws of Florida because they have kids too, because they care about kids too. So a number of lobbyists have helped in this effort. I have a long list of legislators who have been supportive. Unfortunately, they have not been in high enough leadership positions to prevail. But no, I don't want this campaign to be about the Catholic Church. I'm not making it about the Catholic Church. In all of my discussions of this campaign, I have simply talked about the legislature's failures, and when somebody says why, I tell them why. So,
Have you looked into the experience of other states who have succeeded in extending the statute of limitations, like Delaware?
yes.
And is it easier in Delaware, or is it, what's the
Right.
difference?
Delaware is a great example, and as a matter of fact, I met the gentleman who headed up that effort to change the laws in Delaware. He did an amazing job, and one of the things that he did was put together a coalition of interested organizations, and some that were not even involved in child welfare issues, to make the point to the legislature that this was something that had to be done for everyone's benefit, for everyone's safety. He did an amazing job. I think Delaware is an easier state to work with because it is smaller. There's less geography to cover. There's a single media market. I used to live next door to Delaware. I was on the eastern side of Maryland, where I grew up. I think there were some dynamics in Delaware that made it easier than dealing with the Florida legislature. The press coverage that he was able to get as well was very effective because he worked for a newspaper, one of the two major newspapers in Delaware. So yeah, I have borrowed some strategic thoughts from his effort, and I'm certainly replicating those in my efforts. But yeah, Delaware was, I think, an easier haul. Yeah, not that he didn't fight hard, but it was an easier haul. Yes.
Someone who might be able to help you in this might be our Vice President,
Right.
Joe Biden.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're in the process of reaching out to high-profile individuals like that to try to get their support. And I've had some meetings recently that I'm optimistic will come to fruition and provide some very high-profile support for us. So, absolutely.
How about Charlie Crist?
We might be reaching out to him at this time, yes. So,
He's running for Senate.
yes, he is.
Okay, are there any other questions?
I have one. If you had this law in place right now, how many cases do you think, what would your batting average be if you launched every case that would now be eligible for?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question. It's a very good one. What I can tell you again, though, is that statistically speaking, 60 to 70% don't have a chance because they're reported too late. Of those cases, the next question becomes, what is the quality of the evidence that can be brought in a civil or criminal prosecution? And again, I don't know the answer to those questions. What I can tell you, though, is that we ought to give those cases a shot. And I believe we will have prosecutions because there's cases now where prosecutors and civil cases that are not brought despite good evidence simply because of the statute of limitations running. And keep in mind that the majority of the prosecutions that occur in these cases occur because the perpetrator has created evidence at the time. Photographs, videos, diary entries. I'm aware of a case here in Palm Beach County that was prosecuted based upon the predator's own diary, where he wrote down everything he did to record it and reflect back on it for whatever sick purpose. But it's not a situation where it's a he said, she said. There's usually some other form of evidence that is brought to bear. But I don't have any statistics to give you a number of those cases. I'm not familiar with whether or not law enforcement maintains running totals in those regards. But what I can tell you is I've seen letters from state's attorneys declining cases because of the statute of limitations. I've seen police reports that are filed for information purposes only because the statute of limitations has run. I saw one of those just over a month ago. There's no question this happens all the time. If you do a search of newspaper articles in Florida, you'll find at least a half dozen or so stories where the newspapers have reported in Tampa and in Miami and all over the place exactly this problem, that a case was not prosecuted for this reason. Right here in Palm Beach County, when we had a certain bishop stand up in front of a podium and admit to having molested children himself, he was reporting to crimes that occurred where the statute of limitations had expired. So we know this happens.